randomly talking about, etc., which is fine. But I need to learn how to do the actual, like, make the short straight into YouTube. Let's have some lights on. It's a little bit dark today. Okay. And we are good to start. My kids were in here this morning. They put on a really amusing little class. Wish you guys could have seen. It was about 47 seconds worth of class. They were like, what are you going to teach today this morning? And I was like, well, we had planned to do like an endocrine system review. And Edie was like, that sounds like bugs. And so they stood there and did a, like, I guess an entomology class for a few minutes. And I lock this in. It was pretty amazing. She was like, now we're talking about the endocrine beetles. Come on, little dude.
Are the endocrine beetles indigenous to this area?
Right, yeah. Endocrine beetles are like a canoe beetle, if you will. They were brought for agricultural purposes. I don't know. I mean, we would have to bring the guest lecturer back in. Yeah. It's not my specialty. Oh, okay. All right. So let's check in here. Tell me what you guys remember about the endocrine system, and then we'll kind of fill in our missing details.
Well, is this where the hormones come into play?
Exactly, endocrine or hormone system.
And the
hormones.
Things like melatonin and serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
And things.
Melatonin. I like that.
The onin
Serotonin. Uh-huh. The onins. Etc. Okay. What else?
It's adrenaline.
Adrenaline. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we have some glands that create or excrete
Yes.
these things.
Glands.
We've got our ovaries and our testes.
Beautiful.
These things or excrete these things. I don't know if they make them, but I assume they do. And we've got our pituitary and our
glands. Okay. Great. Let's get our glands up here. You said ovaries.
Ovaries and testes and pituitary.
Testes.
And then isn't your little guy is losing interest.
Oh man. Thank you. This is like a wanderer today. It's extra floppy. Okay. What else do we got?
Endocrine hormones are ones that exist within a gland. The exocrines are the ones that go through ducts to get secreted.
This is an important idea. Yes. Exocrine. They leave the glands through ducts. And I'm going to adjust that endocrine idea slightly. Endocrine. The hormones, the chemistry actually does leave the gland and goes to take action elsewhere in the body, but it just basically diffuses out of the gland. Rather than traveling into a duct where it's funneled somewhere specific, it just floats out into that interstitial fluid or into the blood.
So can I say endocrine is go to the blood, into the blood?
Yes. Endocrine.
When it's out of the body.
It's going, so they're just like little channels, little ducts that are taking some of the fluid from the gland. So the hormones are kind of being emitted into like a serum. And if it goes through a duct, it's an exocrine gland.
Not always
Or-
out of the body.
But not always, yeah, not usually out of the body because we want to use those chemicals. What are they for? What are the hormones for?
Regulating mood. Or
Maintain homeostasis.
Yes, regulate. So it's just regulate. Like, this is kind of our overarching term for homeostasis, right? Come back to homeostasis, which is gonna impact mood, but also like a lot of our involuntary action, kind of cellular function. Yep.
is melanin a hormone?
Mm-hmm.
Anything with onin really is like
So melanin is in the skin, right? And we remember it's coming directly from the melanocytes in the skin, but it is basically accomplishing its whole job inside of the like epidermis layer there.
it's so different to the other ones because it feels more
Mhm.
solid and like
Yeah.
everything else feels more liquidy and or like chemical, and that's just like a reaction that happens.
It's just got a little, yeah. Well, they are reactions, right? Each of these glands are having some other kind of reaction, and that's a big part of what's going on with our pituitary or with our pineal gland as well, where we've got one set of hormones or neurotransmitters that's dropping down information into the next set. So we have this kind of cascade of information descending through the body.
So neuroendocrine is especially the hormone secreted in the brain.
It can be. Let's remember we've got, wow, our dude is just flying around right now. You little goofball.
Silly man.
Okay, sorry guys. There's like 4 people watching us right now also.
Me in the future.
That's so sad.
Hello, people.
They're all gone now. They're like, we don't want to be on this crazy
Oh, they're
roller
really-
coaster. It's just like, gotta find this like neutral spot.
Homeostasis.
Yeah, come on, dude. Homeostasis. I wish there was a lock, but there's like not really a lock on it. Like, is there somewhere else I could stick it even?
I think
It's
my
really
theory is
obnoxious.
the vibration on the
On the table.
massage table is causing it to have a issue.
Maybe let's. Yeah, I think you're right that it's like wobbling, trying to accommodate that. But it's not turned on to like do the automatic tracking, it's just off. So it's just struggling. Okay. Let's keep trying. We lost our little friends, but we'll probably get a few more. It's fine. We don't need them. I'll see if I can like cut out these crazy segments so that you guys don't have to re-listen that whole stuff. Okay. We'll figure it out. I've got to reorient the board a little bit. Yeah, I'm running out of. Yes. There we go. Okay. So maybe I can get this further back. Me further forward. And then everyone can see everything. Is that working for humans? Okay. We can make it work for robots as long as it works for humans. Okay. So we started talking about, before all this chaos, we've got the hormones. And tell me about hormones versus neurotransmitters.
Neurotransmitters are directly linked to your brain and your spinal column, and they help you detect sensations. Whereas hormones exist in the glands, and they travel or get secreted or diffused from the place that they live.
Glands. All right. So where exactly are the neurotransmitters living?
Aren't they at the ends of the nerves?
Yes. Synapses.
Dang it.
Perfect. Thanks, Yuko.
Nociceptors? Is it the same thing?
Nociceptors are the pickup organs where at the terminal end of the nerves, you're getting that information clicking together that pain is existing, and then it's feeding into the nervous system. So neurotransmitters are little chemical messengers when they are transmitting across synapses. So they're being directly communicated from one neuron into the next neuron. The same exact little chemical messengers, most of the time, are also able to signal around inside of the body. They're emitting from the glands, and they're landing on the cell plasma membrane. Most of the time. Okay. So it's the same message. It's the same little messenger, but depending on who receives it, just like if you're like at the White House and you get on the podium and you give some kind of public service announcement, right? Depending on who is listening to the message, different things might happen. So you might have like military action from the like military listeners, and you might have the news reporters like run off and go a different direction to go pick up more information. You might have like the finance people start writing up a packet, right?
Did you see
So
the video of Joe Biden saying he likes cookies on TikTok?
oh no.
He looks, John Stewart did a bit on it. He's just like,
Oh no.
trying to be real.
I like cookies. Okay.
Anyways.
So anyway, hormones are being developed in the body, mostly in the glands. And when they're used in neurotransmitters, as neurotransmitters in the synapses by the nerves, then we're calling them neurotransmitters. When they go to the cell plasma membrane and start changing cell behavior, and any particular cell, like it's not like the message is, say, go to floor 2. The message is something is happening on floor 2. So the different cells have their own code of when they get this message, what is their behavioral response to this message. So the combination of hormones that are arriving on that plasma membrane at a given time are going to modulate the individual behaviors of the individual cells when they hit the receptors there.
Did we ever, I had a question about nervinorbor a while ago, and what that is. I know it's like the nerve of a nerve that senses if the nerve is damaged. So it's like a little inception thing. But is that the same as a neurotransmitter?
Not exactly. It's like more of a structural component. But the transmitters are, to kind of give this little visual, right, is we have the junction between 2 neurons where there's a little gap in space, and it really is just a gap in space. Like there's just fluid flowing everywhere, but it's going to happen really quickly, so it's mostly going to go directly between these two. There is some leak off of like neurotransmitters just floating out in the like fluid layers of the wherever you are in the central nervous system, right? But one of these edges is going to be kind of covered in receptors, all different kinds of receptors. And one of these sides is going to be loaded up with the neurotransmitters themselves. Okay? And they're also all different kinds. And so the electrical signal that's coming down this neuron is going to fire off the release of some specific neurotransmitters. When they hit the receptors on the other side, another electrical signal is going to shoot up into the next neuron.
This goes both ways. There are receptors on both ends of this circuit, right?
They're generally directional. Oh. Yeah. And so they'll be combined where the neuronal body has a receiving end and a firing end. Okay. Most of them. And that's, I wish we had some good pictures in the textbook. I feel like it's kind of pointless to try to get it across without a little bit of imagery. But there's a handful of different structures that a given neuron could have. And they're going to be kind of divided up by how many of these receiving ends and sending ends, negative and positive, if you will.
I just had the biggest brain fart because I was imagining nucleus whenever you said neuron, and a nucleus is in the middle of a cell, right?
Right, that's right.
Neurons are not.
Neurons
cells.
are cells, and so they actually do have a nucleus up in here. Yep. And that's going to have its own whole little like genetic code happening, a whole cytoplasm, which is the skeleton of a cell. It's going to have basically its own internal chemistry regulation, like everything that happens that you have a body system for, the individual cells also have body systems that mimic those functions, with a few major exceptions such as like the erythrocytes that are much simpler because they just have kind of a short little worker bee life where they go out there and they carry oxygen and they just do that as hard as they can until they die. And they don't like replicate off of themselves or anything like that because they're coming off the bone marrow. Yeah. So that is what's going on with the neurotransmitter function specifically. When this is happening on the plasma membrane of the cells, so now we're out into like visceral organ cells or what have you throughout the somatic system, right? So we have a cell, body, cell. I'm going to give it a blue plasma membrane that is like the skin of the cell. And this little cell has its whole thing. It's got its DNA and its RNA and its cytoplasm and all this and that. But the outside of the plasma membrane has all these little different receivers. Just like our little receivers over here were specialized to what chemical messages they could possibly pick up. These are all like individual. So the chemicals, the hormones themselves are like keys that will only open certain locks. And then the locks are on the receiving end there. So if you get, say, a wash of, I need a whole nother set of markers again, you guys. If you get a wash of, say, a little bit of oxytocin and a little bit of serotonin, then they like lock into the different. And so in actuality, of course, there's like just thousands of these receivers on every individual cell, and there's millions of cells. There's like 50 trillion cells or whatever in the whole body. And they're all covered in these receivers, and they can be taking, if you think of it three-dimensionally, of course, it's covered in these receivers all over. So it can be getting a lot of different kinds of little bits of information, all of which are slightly adjusting the behavior of the cell. Then the cell is making slight adjustments to its own environment, and it's sending off its little communication to the other nearby cells, and you can get these chain reactions with the chemicals and the cells, and they're all talking to each other, and everything is connected, and it's extremely elaborate system going on there. So what we've established so far is we've got two applications. We've got the neurotransmission and the hormone application of when it's happening in the central nervous system versus when it's happening in the somatic body. And that we also have the purpose of regulation of homeostasis. We've got some of the glands we've come up with, and we've got some of the actual hormones we've come up with. How are you guys feeling on that so far?
Good. The difference between hormones and neurotransmitters is just the end location.
Yes. Yes.
Information that's being sent.
It is technically, like if you look at the chemicals, one chemical versus another, they're like chemically identical, and we're distinguishing them based on where they are being used. Yep.
Endocrine, it's one of the endocrine.
New endocrine?
Neuro.
Neuroendocrine, yes. This is when we're specifically talking about the way that the endocrine system and the nervous system are interfacing, what the hormones are doing to the nerves and vice versa. That's our term for that intersection, neuroendocrine. I don't know why I put an S on there. I'm silly. I just, it's like I'm gonna go shop at Aldi's or Target's or something. Never mind. I have no idea. I actually have never lived in the Midwest, so why was that the grocery store that came to mind? Cool. All right. Back to integumentary system. I'm gonna scan. Yeah, probably. I'm just gonna scan on this. I do have some of our images out so that we can kind of reference as we come up with questions here. And do you guys want to talk about which endocrine organs we have got?
Yes.
Yeah?
Sure,
All right. Let's revisit that. What do you remember so far?
I'm trying to think of the one that are attached.
Pancreas?
The pancreas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we've got, I'm going to kind of put it, I don't want to actually draw a person, but we'll like make a loose reference to where we are in space with this profile over here. Okay, so we've got a pancreas. Mm-hmm. What else we got?
Ovaries?
Mm-hmm.
Testes?
We'll call that collective set gonads. Ovaries in female bodies. Testes in male bodies. Yep. I'm glad we're reviewing this. Good call.
Do the mammary glands provide any kind of endocrine?
You know, they kind of do. That's. Let's kind of give them a little. They do some action for sure. We don't exactly put them in the main list just because they're sort of seasonal operations, and a lot of the hormones that they produce are consumed in the mammary system or are built for the baby. And so they're a little bit different application, but there is definitely some endocrine action going on there at times. The colon is the same as the large intestine. So not that there's no hormonal activity, but it's not a gland proper.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
You got your pituitary.
Yes.
Kidneys.
What do we have going on? We've got the pituitary up here. We've got kidneys. Kidneys are definitely involved, but what's at the kidneys? The kidneys are urinary system, and they're doing their little function. But they've got some little buddies that are snuggling on them that are endocrine glands, yeah?
The thing that people keep taking out when they don't need their appendix, is that right?
Whoa, appendix. That is some left field. Let's talk about appendix really quick, because that is important. It actually is, we think of it as something that is mostly used in babies. It's kind of important for the way that the digestive system is setting up and some of the early hormone functions of babies that's not super active in adults. The appendix is actually a teeny tiny, it's an appendage, it's appendixed onto a book, right? Has an appendix at the end that just has kind of a library reference sort of thing. So in adult humans, the appendix is just attached kind of at the intersection where the small intestine is feeding into the large intestine, consolidating, and then it is just kind of on there. And some of the theories right now that are more compelling about why do we even have this is actually that it may be a gut biome library. That it has its own little flora system. And so this is why it's kind of vulnerable and also why we'd get away with not having it. But the appendix is technically part of the digestive system for those of you that still have one.
Okay. So
In the throat?
the
Thyroid.
Thyroid.
Yeah. I'm going to throw that on there. Thyroid. But let's go back to those kidneys because you guys are so close. The kidneys have a snuggle buddy.
Spleen?
The
Thymus?
Thymus, we're going to put down in there. Thymus.
adrenal gland.
Yes.
Oh.
It's the adrenal glands. The kidneys themselves are not major endocrine glands, but they are cuddled right up with the adrenal glands. Great. You guys are getting there.
And then you got your hypothalamus.
Yeah. Hypo. Yes. And pineal. That's starting to look very good. Yeah.
Pituitary, already did that one. Thyroid did that one. Parathyroid.
Yeah, that is the only one that the book is kind of adding, wanting us to distinguish. Parathyroid is also. The parathyroid is kind of a funny little, it's almost like if the thyroid was like the butterfly, the parathyroid is like just some tiny little tissue segments that are like the dots on a butterfly's wings. But they are distinct from the thyroid in that they're making a somewhat different set of compounds and responding to different stimulus there. Okay. Okay.
Placenta.
Yeah. Also a nice little seasonal resource of the endocrine system. Cool. So you got them all. These are our major glands, our significant glands. There are some effects going on. You guys said kidney, and I was like, I really wanted you to get to the adrenals, but we do have a couple of little compounds coming off the kidneys as well. And then the stomach, the duodenum and the jejunum. Do you remember what those are? Duodenum and jejunum?
The duodenum is like a gate or whatever that goes between the large intestine and the small intestines.
Yeah, these are just regions in the intestines. And so you can just put that in with your...
It's not like a sphincter or anything like that.
Right, it's just kind of segments that are
What
a
was the
little...
other one you asked about?
The duodenum and the jejunum, both of them are just kind of segments of the intestines. So in those locations, you have a few specific digestion-related endocrine activities going on. And then the stomach itself is producing some hormones.
Oh, okay.
And that pretty much covers our major hormones. We also have the heart. And the heart is, I'm going to squeeze it in here. The heart, for all we know, it may have a lot more impact than we currently understand. We keep finding that that is the case as we look closer and closer at how things are interconnected. But as of right now, the major understanding is that the heart is producing hormones for the heart. So it's kind of just feeding its own little self-regulation there. So that is pretty great. I'm going to make my son turn this down because that's obnoxious. Hey, bro. You got to turn that down and move into the further away room. We can hear you too much. Thanks. That was awesome. Jejunum.
That sounds like something you want from your hairdresser. Could you give me some jejunum?
Yeah, jejunum. It's like you need like an intestine dresser. Jejunum.
I take my probiotics for my jejunum.
I like it. Okay. I'm scanning for if there's some of this terminology that we really should make sure that we're getting.
Boy, we sure had some rain last night.
We did. It was pounding. Okay. So a few things. Do you guys, you completed your notes here on this? I kind of don't want to erase it because we might flush this back out a little more. So we covered this idea of endocrine glands are secreting mostly into the bloodstream, sometimes into the interstitial fluid. Exocrine glands are secreting into ducts. There are a few classes of hormones. Once they're emerged, we're going to have pretty much all of the hormones fall into groups of steroids, polypeptides, glycoproteins, and derivatives of amino acids. Okay. And let's think of You guys talked about the purpose of the hormones or of the endocrine system generally was we came up with regulating towards homeostasis and that there's mood impact from that. But let's think a little bit bigger picture. What is the overall, like what are the somewhat more specific functions of the endocrine system? What can the body tell us with those kind of chemical messages?
How tired we are.
Mm-hmm.
Hunger, like if we're exhausted or not.
Yeah.
Whether we're supposed to become boys or girls.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The secondary sex characteristics.
Absolutely.
Whether we're in love.
Okay. So I want to draw, but I don't want to erase. So I'm going back and forth. Yeah, I need another whiteboard. But so I'm hearing hungry, rest, sexual traits. Okay.
Fight or flight, or
Fight or flight can be like definitely has some hormonal cascades, but we'll see that mostly in the nervous system is where we're getting the headlines on that.
Endocrine. Well, adrenaline.
sleepy time.
Sleepy time. Yeah. So level of wakefulness we're getting, whether we're accelerating or going into rest. We have communication happening in the endocrine system about that. Yeah.
How reactive, like on a cortisol, like you have cortisol versus adrenaline. Long-term stress versus short-term stress habits.
Yeah.
What else?
Cortisol feeding into that stress level. So overall, we're going to see the endocrine system regulating growth, including repair, right? So the rest cycle, like the reason that we need to be communicated with from our body that it's time to rest is that need to go into restorative processes and have time for growth or repair on a cellular and structural level. And then metabolism, so the speed at which we're using the resources that we already have, the calibration of our resource burning to our environmental needs, yeah. And then as Karen was hitting in with the secondary sex characteristics and that kind of stuff, reproduction. So the three big categories that we can really think of as like these are the responsibilities of the endocrine system to really modulate is that growth, metabolism, and reproduction. Okay. Some of the organs of the body, like we talked about the heart, the stomach, we've got some locations where we have a few multifunction things going on and we're throwing some hormones. There's a little bit of chemical messengering, but we do have a few glands that are absolutely exclusively endocrine glands. So which ones are exclusively endocrine glands?
Just say the gonads.
Mm-hmm. These are using, I'm going to distinguish just a little bit because it's not a no, but it's not exactly a yes, because they're also using the hormones that they're receiving really closely into building reproductive cells, right? So we're maturing eggs and we're constructing sperm. Reproductive. Also at the gonads. Okay.
So the pituitary?
Mm-hmm. This is a powerhouse.
Adrenal.
Adrenal, yes. Very much so.
I'm not sure about the parathyroid.
Well, can you think of anything else that the thyroid or the parathyroid would be doing besides hormone regulation? There's no food passing through there. There's no respiration going on there. It's not holding anything up, right? These are just endocrine glands. Yep. Okay.
What about the thymus? Does it have another function besides?
The thymus. It does. It actually is constructing a fair amount of our leukocytes.
Oh.
Good question. Thymus is really involved in reading and interpreting the immune system. Yeah.
What's the pancreas doing?
The pancreas, great question. Do you remember, anybody remember what the pancreas was doing?
Doesn't it make bile or something like that?
Anybody? It's pretty large, right? Remember the pancreas? Yeah.
But it's
The,
like connected to the stomach, right?
yeah, so it is.
Does something with stomach acids or something?
Yeah, so the pancreas is really interesting because it is adjusting the various kinds of fluids of the digestive process, and it's also considered an exocrine and endocrine gland. It's doing both at the same time. Exocrine and endocrine. Because it's secreting the juices into the pancreatic duct, and it's also regulating insulin and glucagon into the blood simultaneously. So it's kind of an interesting one. Yes, the pancreas is a underappreciated organ.
Oh.
Yeah.
We never mentioned, I feel it in my pancreas that
Yeah.
digesting my food.
The pancreas might be focusing too hard on what it's trying to keep track of yeah, that's a good point. We never hear people say I feel it in my pancreas. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Just mess that one up. One more.
Pineal?
Yeah, great. Yep, so those are our ones that are really they're hanging out to make hormones for us. And
what hormones does the pineal produce?
the pineal gland is mostly responsible for our melatonin. There's some other really interesting stuff going on up there. That's our big function is the melatonin, and the book actually is not even listing anything else specifically, but the pineal gland is gonna kind of signal some action and cue. Basically, the volume of melatonin has a huge amount of impact in our alertness levels, and then that's going to cascade through the system on basically how fast we're going to be metabolizing everything else. The melatonin, mostly from there, is going to kind of hit the hypothalamus pituitary axis, and the pituitary is going to have a huge variety of cascading hormonal impacts that it's sending down into the rest of the body. So that the melatonin, we'll sometimes call the pineal gland the master gland, but I feel like that's kind of silly because the pituitary gland is doing so many more things. I don't know, but that's the...
You got your starship, right?
Right?
You got your captain.
Exactly. There you go. It's is it
And
go
then
forward?
Number one is the pituitary gland. And
I like it, Karen.
Okay, Sue, pull the lever.
Right.
And it's like,
Can
yeah,
distribute
yeah,
the tasks
yeah.
to all the different specialized officers.
Right.
Yeah, I hear ya. What's up, bro? Thirsty? Cool. Have fun. Bye. I love you. Yep. So pineal gland, melatonin. At the pituitary gland, we're going to have growth hormone, prolactin. That's specifically in lactating mothers. Thyroid stimulating hormone, telling the thyroid what to do. Adrenocortical hormone, telling the adrenal glands what to do. Follicle stimulating hormone. Where's the follicles?
The hair, all over your skin. Dermis.
That is a great one. Those are follicles, but which follicles are getting stimulated directly by hormone?
Oh.
Follicle stimulating hormone is for ovum.
To shoot out an egg or to grab it?
Yeah, to tell the follicles that are holding the eggs inside of the ovaries to like resource an egg and prepare it to maturity so that that next menstrual cycle can have an available egg ready to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, is talking to the ovaries. Luteinizing hormone is also mostly talking to the ovaries, but is somewhat uptaken by the uterus itself. Melanocyte stimulating hormone. So that's, where's the melanocytes?
Skin?
In the skin. Yep. So pituitary gland is also talking to the skin. Thyrotropin releasing hormone. Who was that talking to?
Thyroid tropin, the thyroid.
Yeah. And corticotropin factor. Who would we expect to be listening to that? Exactly, the adrenal glands, watching for cortical. And then we've got the prolactin inhibiting factor. Who's that talking to?
Lactin would be lactating the breasts.
Yeah. We're also talking to the mammaries. So that's just kind of the icing on the cake on the pituitary gland hypothalamus, specifically in the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. We've got antidiuretic hormone. What's that for?
So that you
Just
can
guessing based on measurements, right?
about water in your system. You know?
Yeah,
You wanna,
exactly.
You want to retain water, or you gotta sweat or pee or whatever.
Right. So antidiuretic would be giving an instruction to do what?
Diuretic meaning gotta go pee.
Uh-huh.
So you're
Like
gonna
amplifying
You're
urination.
gonna retain the water, right?
Uh-huh. So who's that talking to?
Your bladder, where you retain the water in your.
Who's
your
deciding?
Fat cells stuff.
Who's deciding about the water that's in your bloodstream already? How much to
it's
keep?
in your bloodstream. Your heart.
Well, your lymph has all the fluid.
Keep going.
What dictates
We were
where
closest
water-
when we were on the bladder. If we're talking about the urinary output or lack thereof, we would need to be in the urinary system. Yeah.
Oh, the kidneys.
Kidneys.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. Antidiuretic hormone is talking to the kidneys. And then we've got this nice big broad application. Everybody loves this hormone, oxytocin. It's coming out of that posterior lobe of the pituitary gland.
Gonads, right?
Hmm?
Or wait, where does that go?
Where does oxytocin go?
The brain?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Where else?
gonads.
Yes.
Gonads.
Where else?
Oxytocin.
My heart.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. That's also one of those, the uterus is an interesting organ, right? That has, like, it's a muscle largely, but it has the cellular reception on the uterus is really wild. And so there's an absolute shit ton of reception for oxytocin available on the uterus as well.
Oh. Is that to make your baby happy?
It's actually to make your baby come out. So when if you ever hear of somebody being medically induced into labor,
Yeah.
What they're using is a synthetic chemical that strongly resembled oxytocin. And so that oxytocin is going to create the contractions. It is actually going to stabilize the tissue of the uterus up until a certain threshold. And it's a really weird like feedback thing where it's like it will make the uterus more strong and stable and kind of spacious for the baby, allow some room there. There's a lot of other stuff going on, but that it's kind of stabilizing the pregnancy up until it tips over a certain level. And then it's going to start actually inducing the contractions and forcing the uterine muscle to start pushing down. And that's going to trigger the collapse of the placenta adhesion and the, along with some other material, have the cervical dilation responding to the flood of oxytocin coming in. And so the cervix is going to dilate, opening up, making space for the baby to come out. And then there's also quite a lot of oxytocin reception in the mammary glands as well. And so oxytocin is an interesting one because it has like a tendency toward a cascading effect where the uterus is going to change behavior when it crests a certain amount of oxytocin and trigger that labor. The mammary glands, when they crest a certain amount of oxytocin, are going to do a release of, it's going to trigger the letdown reflex for the milk. And in the brain, you know that switch you sometimes flip where you're like, oh, this person's kind of cool, I think I like being around them, or even like, that person kind of annoys me and I don't even like them. And then suddenly you're like in love. This is the oxytocin cascade effect again. So we can get some like weird hard-edged reactions with oxytocin, but it is a nice stabilizer, and it's also going to kind of contradict the action of adrenaline and cortisol, where the balance in the body overall of oxytocin versus adrenal chemistry is pretty much an exact equivalent of the concept of love is greater than fear. That if you can get this love sensation, if you can get your oxytocin popped up above a certain level, it's like almost impossible to experience like panic or reactive fear sensations.
But also that initial thing you said where the serotonin drops first.
Yeah, the attachment reflex of dropping out a little bit. And that's not sustained. That's not like if you have a partner, your serotonin is lower. It's like in that like maybe 90-day window of chemical attachment really happening that the serotonin drop out kind of goes through its arc.
In glands where there's multiple hormones happening at once, they're like, would a hormone cancel out another hormone, like take over the space that one of them has, like in the...
Not really. Like, I mean, hormones are costly. Like, creating hormones takes a lot of energy, like just literally your metabolism of your body. If you're like running a high level of hormones, like you're using a lot of adrenaline and you're emotionally whipping from like intense connection to intense fear, and you're having a lot of shame, you're having a lot of anger, and you're like this is a lot of metabolism for your body to be like clicking together all these little hormones all the time and putting them out there. And they do counteract each other in the sense of once they get onto the cell wall, if they're giving opposite instructions, the cell has to kind of make its judgment about like how that balances out. But they're not necessarily gonna like, you know, it's not like they're battling it out in your bloodstream, one molecule against another, you know.
Like your genetics might determine which one kind of like how it's interpreted.
Sure, Yeah, genetics, habituation. Like realistically, like every environment that you've ever been in has had a small impact on your tendencies, on all the way down to a cellular level, of how you're going to tend to respond, because your body wants to do what works in your environment, like more than anything. So it'll make a lot of adjustments. But yeah, they're not like raging in the bloodstream. Any other questions on some of those? So we're kind of coming up on a good break.
Trying to sum up the idea of oxytocin has a cascade effect where the behavior of the something changes when it's crested. Is it the behavior of the gland or the behavior of the
receptor?
Of the receptor.
Yeah. Yeah, the receptor, depending where we're seeing it, the ovaries, the mammaries, in the brain, whatever, that there's just a tendency for there to be like a threshold effect with oxytocin that's not necessarily across the... Because like birth is one of our few really strong, clear examples in the human body of a positive feedback loop. That mostly we're going to have negative feedback loops, meaning that when homeostasis is diverted a certain direction, the body will start sensing and receiving that, and then it will do something that offsets that effect, and it'll try to like bring back to homeostasis. So the stimulus creates a negative response to the stimulus in the sense that it's an offset, right? But once the birth process starts carrying along, it's like a cascading process where the stimulus causes the body to give birth more and then more and then more and so it builds up to a point until obviously like it can't give birth anymore after the baby's out. And that's the switch over of the stimulus, where the stimulus itself is withdrawn by the body's response, but the body will keep amplifying. In a healthy body, in a like natural birth situation, ideally the body will just keep amplifying the responsiveness to that stimulus until it's completed. And the original stimulus for the birth process actually comes from the baby. Yeah.
I'm ready.
All right. Yep, exactly. Baby's got to get born. So we're working through that. So we went a little bit deeper into that pineal gland, pituitary gland stuff. We don't have to dive too hard into what exactly is going on with the stomach, the pancreas. We've woven in and out on what's up with the gonads, and I feel pretty satisfied with that. If you guys don't have too much extra questions on that. We talked a little bit about the uterus. I will fill out while I'm kind of cruising across, making sure that we're on track with that. The uterus is as the host of the placenta, which is our other like seasonal endocrine organ, right? The placenta is going to be also producing a really strong amount of progesterone. So on an average menstrual cycle, which we already have kind of connected in, our reproductive changes are generally mediated by the endocrine system, right? And so in the reproductive cycle, and we won't dive too hard on this, but the ovaries are being ripened with that follicle stimulating hormone, and then eventually the egg itself is prepared. It's been stimulated enough and it's going to pop out the side of the ovary. The follicle and the egg have a certain amount of like progesterone capacity where it's going to start like kicking up the overall progesterone in the body. And what that means, progesterone, gestation is that gest, right? And so it's pro-pregnancy, right? And so while the egg is in transit, then the stimulus of the progesterone is like from that part of the process. But once a fertilized egg has successfully attached into the uterus, it's immediately going to start generating that placenta and the like super preliminary structure of the placenta is going to take over massive progesterone production right away. And it's actually the progesterone that prevents the shedding of the uterine lining and stops the period from happening, such that the baby keeps developing in the uterus there. Okay, so that's being emitted by the placenta for the entire pregnancy. It's also going to produce a lot of estrogen and just generally keep all those secondary sex traits of the mother turned up as much as possible. We're going to have chorionic gonadotropins that just contribute to the general function of the gestation period. And also relaxin. Relaxin is a super interesting chemical that is quite useful in its application to, it's being emitted by the placenta, right? And it's going into the uterus, which has a lot of receptivity to that. And so we get that dynamic expansion of the uterus because of that relaxin. It's literally telling it, like, let the fibers hang longer than normal, let the tone of the cell walls of those muscle fibers open up so that there's more space there. But it makes a lot, like it's very much readable in the bloodstream of the mother for the entire pregnancy. And it is also accountable for a lot of the rest of the like less pleasant signature experiences of pregnancy. Like sore back, like splaying feet, extra foot soreness, because actually the muscles of the foot are allowing the arch of the foot to collapse by losing tone there. The back is like not stabilizing the weight of the spine or of the upper body as much. Shoulders, like all this general soreness, like weakness, because the tone of the muscle is what lets us actually, you know, go up against gravity all the time. And so the sensation of every item being like reading as heavier to the mother is like actually coming from the tone of the muscle fibers being lengthened, and it's going to apply to the ligaments and tendons as well and create that.
And is that hormonal? The muscles are communicating with the hormone to know to relax?
Yeah, they're
more?
picking up the relaxin directly because the relaxin is targeting muscle cells. Yeah. So that's fun and exciting.
That's a lot of different kinds of hormones.
Yup. Do you guys feel good about the adrenal glands? Okay, because we spent a fair amount of time on that.
I feel hormonal. Like every time we talk about hormones, I feel them more.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can learn to tune into kind of picking up the subtle sensations of hormones more effectively. Okay, well, I think that was seemed like we had a pretty thorough, for just being a review, we covered a lot of the content of the endocrine system for today. Do you guys have any other like big outstanding questions?
Jejunum, duodenum, cecum, right? Those are all the intestine things.
Yeah.
Jejunum, we just went over duodenum.
Duodenum.
Cecum is like the smallest component of all of them, right?
Yes. Honestly, my digestion is like not that, I don't think about it when we're not teaching that class day. So it's not my strongest.
I've seen that list a bunch, so
Uh-huh.
I know that duodenum, jejunum, and cecum are just, it's important to know that they're the intestines.
They're part of, yeah, exactly. Be able to identify that those are part of the intestines. You got the sigmoid colon. Yeah. The ascending, transverse, and descending colon.
Right.
And that now you pretty much got all the way through there. I said that in the wrong order though. I feel like sigmoid is the one that I'm like, I have to remember that one, but the rest of them make sense. But sigmoid is the last
And the
before the rectum.
intestines don't have a gland inside of them. They're just surrounded by different glands that excrete.
They're just kind of fluffing in the. I mean, they're attached in, but they have a lot of motility because they're not like. It's not like every bit of the intestine is locked into something else because they have to have a lot of space to be able to do that rolling motion.
Then what's the relationship between serotonin and the small intestine? That's my question.
Okay, so a lot of serotonin is produced and consumed in the small intestine, and it has to do a lot with the like maintenance of the gut biome.
Okay. And the acid kind of getting filtered by the pancreas into the small intestine, I'm guessing?
Yeah, we're wanting to thin out the acidification so that we're not hitting the small intestine with quite the strength that we needed for the stomach itself.
Okay. So it's produced within the small intestine.
The serotonin, there is, a lot of serotonin produced. I could look up a little bit more about that and get back to you. Do you guys want to take a little break and we can circle back soon? Yeah. All right. Sounds good.